are you this morning? And welcome to British summertime. It is actually raining. There's a light, persistent drizzle. If only I had decided to film this live yesterday. We had the most glorious, intense blue skies all day, sunshine, a little bit chilly, but it was absolutely glorious. So if you're watching along with me live, please leave me the hashtag live. And if you're catching up later on, leave me the hashtag replay and I will catch up with you in the comments. Now, I've got a bit of a job to do here, so really you're going to be my accountability partners today. Do you remember all those bulbs that I'd planted to flower indoors in the early months of the year? I've taken them out of their original containers, I put them on this tray, and then the tray has been sitting on my patio table for absolutely ages. So I have decided now is the time to replant my bulbs. Raining with you too, Joan, as well. It's ever so slightly depressing, isn't it? Especially when you've had a really nice day. I had a really nice, sunshine weather day, but I was indoors all day because I had things to do, so I couldn't get out and enjoy it. And I thought, oh, fabulous. I got my Tuesday with my flower fans, and it's just the wrong weather. Anyway, you'll know that I'm not a gardener. I just do not enjoy the digging of holes and things like that. So I am forcing myself to replant my bulbs. Now, part of me thinks, would I just be better off putting my bulbs straight onto the compost heap? Because they don't seem to grow or rejuvenate in the way they do when they're originally planted. I would say, I'll show you a slot later if I can of some of the hyacinths that are coming back after being indoor hyacinths. I think I've had a modicum of success with my grape hyacinths, but I would say that I should have a garden full of tete-a-tete daffodils, and they're not here. And my paper white daffodils that cost an absolute fortune, about £6 for a tiny bag of them, which came up really well indoors last year. And I planted them up at the top in a sort of white section of the garden, and I haven't seen hide or hair of them since. And of course, with your tulips, if you are a tulip aficionado, I think the done thing is that when you cut your tulips, you actually lift the bulbs, and particularly if you're a flower farmer or a grower, you ditch the bulbs and you plant fresh each year. So when you're growing tulips, it's like sowing seeds each year. I always thought, trying to remember my parents' garden, that their tulips and daffodils just kept coming back year after year. But the second year of the tulips is noticeably smaller. And I wonder whether those are the tulips that get sent to the supermarket. Are they 2-year-old tulips? Because they always seem to have really small heads. Anyway, I am a little bit prepared. So because I don't want to be digging loads and loads of holes, I've started digging myself a little trough here, and I can't tell you how much I don't enjoy it. So if you're a gardener, you're probably pulling your hair out at this point, saying, oh, it's such a lovely thing to do, really. But I'm just seeing this as one massive chore. But I will say, my husband gardens for wildlife, and I'm pleased to report that I've already seen 2 worms in this little trough that I've started digging. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to planting clumps, and I'm just working out whether I can discern. I've got 3 kinds of bulbs here. I've got my grape hyacinths, I've got my regular hyacinths. I think I'm going to dump those out there, and I've also got my tete-a-tete. So if I can work out which is which, I'm going to plant them in a group, so that in the hope that they do come back next year, it's going to look a little bit sort of planned. I think things look, I don't know anything about gardening, but I do think things look better in clumps rather than the dot everywhere. Same in flower arranging, really. You want a nice soothing focal area. Here I am giving gardening advice. So those grape hyacinths are going in there. And not only do I not like digging holes, it's all the back of it I have to do too. I think I'm just a 100% gardening wuss. I really can't tell you how much I don't like doing it. So I think probably because there's no guarantee, is it? Perhaps that's what I don't like. I guess if you're a gardener, you quite like the anticipation of, are your flowers going to bloom again? You know, and you're nurturing them as if they're your little children. And I'm just thinking, I like the certainty of going to my florist or the street market or the supermarket and letting somebody else do all the hard work, so I don't have to be fretting about what's growing or not. So, dirty hands. And then I've got this many, which I think are tater-tates, so I'm going to dig another hole and what I do like, it's quite nice seeing the dark soil. We don't have much soil exposed in our garden because my husband plants loads of ground cover spreading plants in order that he doesn't have to do any weeding. So I'm planting these because I know there's pretty much nothing here. It's what grows here. I've got native geraniums growing here. So there's quite an insubstantial flower, but quite pretty. There's some forget-me-nots that are coming up, which are almost like weeds. You know, you have to sort of divide them and chuck them. And then I think I might actually have weeds here. Is it Speedwell, that tiny, really pretty but insignificant flower? And then next to me here, I've got some chives. So I'm going to dig another large hole. And my plan is just to group everything up in my hand with the bulbs lying evenly and plant as many as I can at once. So first clump going in, second clump going in, and then backfill with my hands, scrunch the soil around, and I guess, do I have to do that thing where I have to stand and heel them in to make sure they're firm, there's no air around them? I would do that, apart from the fact I'm not wearing any gardening shoes. I'm wearing my normal everyday shoes, gardening my everyday clothes. So I'm going to ball my hand up into a fist and push them down. So job done. And then I've got some leftover bits of soil, which I'm just going to go like that with. So that will need running under the kitchen tap and then washing up properly. So, I found some tulips there. I think these tulips, can you see them? I got a delivery of Freddie's Flowers and they put the tulips in and they were still on the bulbs. And I always think that's a trendy thing to do. And then they say, of course, you can plant the bulbs afterwards. But I guess really, as a grower, because you don't want the tulips to flower in your field for another year because they don't grow so well the second year, but we feel as the customer we're getting a really good deal. We end up saving them and planting them, but actually they're not going to do much in our gardens either. So it's really good, quite a good marketing ploy, isn't it? And then you don't have to go to the trouble of cutting all the ends off the tulips. You just pull them out of the ground if you were the seller. So I've got something slightly more exciting to do, so I'm going to spin the camera around. Did you see the video I posted yesterday, 3:00 yesterday? It was my story of entering into a flower arranging competition. And if you haven't already seen that, do check it out, and I'll try and remember to link it, to put it in the description under this video when it goes live. So I entered a flower arranging competition, and one of the things I wanted to make, or I made, was a door wreath. A welcome arrangement for a front door, which I automatically thought is going to be a circle, going to be a door wreath. And then when I reread the schedule afterwards, because the other competitors in that class didn't do circles, they did lovely long hangings. And I was thinking, I obviously didn't read it properly. As soon as anyone says door to me, I immediately say wreath, and a wreath is round. So I did rather amuse myself. I can remember talking about this door wreath, what I was going to do with this door wreath, but not actually what the show schedule said. So for my door wreath, I made it on a wire frame which I had bound with sisal because I didn't have any moss. Sisal is like this fibrous, I think it might even be coconut fibres, and it was a pale sort of, just a pale white cream background. And then I attached silver birch twigs either side, and then wanted to create my focal area by having flowering bulbs in a mass at the bottom and then have them sort of trailing up around the sides. So overbought really with my flowering bulbs, because I wanted to make sure I had enough that would be in flower and also enough for emergencies. So actually I did need quite a lot. I can see Joan making a comment. Joan says it was very good. I thought it was going to be a step-by-step of how you made it. Today's video, I'll have to read that back again, Joan. So you've thrown me there, Joan, with your comments. Oh, you meant in the video I posted yesterday, you thought you were going to give me a step-by-step. No, that was just travelling along with my journey, Joan. So sort of going through the thought process. It was quite stressful entering the competition. In hindsight, as you would have seen in the video, I wish I'd only entered one class because it's quite a lot to do. And as I was explaining in yesterday's video, the show schedule must have been available if you were a member of the Horticulture Society. They must have had it available to them for several months. Thank you, James. James saying I did very well. So I'd only decided to enter the show on the Tuesday evening, and I knew I had to set up on the Friday. So that only gave me all day Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to actually get my pieces together. So as well as filming my sort of thought process for you, I hope you like the bits where I showed you those little sketches I did. And if you zoom the video back and forward, you can see I did a sketch, and then just by the nature of things, it didn't quite work out like that in all circumstances. So you'll have to go back and flick between my sketches and the finished photographs. So yes, it just would have been slightly too much pressure if I had to film every single stage. But Joan, you know how to make a door wreath. I bound my sisal onto the door wreath exactly the same way I would bind my moss on. In actual fact, I wanted moss, but we're just between seasons, because Christmas door wreath season is over and then hanging basket season hasn't quite started yet. So you know what to do, don't you, Joan? You could take your metal frame and you get your moss. I should add it to my list. So Joan is suggesting that I add that door wreath that I made to my Zoom flower class list. So that's certainly an option. On the subject of Zoom flower classes, where at the moment, the series I'm filming at the moment is how you can teach your own flower class. So we've had an introductory section, and then we've had 3 little classes, and we've got 3 more classes starting on Tuesday the 18th of April, when I'm actually going to be bringing flowers for class. At the moment it's been a bit of a brainstorming session, and I've been giving you little sheets to think about before class, and then showing you how I plan out my lessons. So the next few sessions are going to have real life flowers, not so much me teaching how to arrange, but if you were going to teach something similar to what I'm going to demonstrate, what the teaching points would be in the different parts of classes. And then yes, once we've covered the teaching bit, we may well go back into my traditional flower arranging classes, where I show you projects. So it looks like we have got perhaps a number of things that we could already be thinking of. I need to make a list of these in the back of my diary. So we could do that modern door wreath as one of the projects. I've also done another door wreath in the sort of mille fleur style, which I went to a workshop at the weekend, so I could share some of those techniques. But yes, we'll have to think of the ideas. It's always difficult thinking of the ideas, so when you suggest things, it's always really helpful. Now, what I'm going to do here is get up and off my plastic bag, and I'm not sure whether you can hear the noises next door. They're having the roof of their conservatory refinished or rebuilt, so there's quite a lot of banging going on, so I'm hoping that that's not going to be distracting you. So I shall walk around this way to my second little station. Actually, Joan, thinking about it, we can talk about this at the coffee morning, can't we, this morning? And then yes, it's a bit hard, isn't it, having a two-way conversation where you have to type, I have to notice your comments, interpret it, and then, why am I having that? I could sit on that and I'm not going to get a wet bottom there. I feel like I'm at guide camp when I'm having to get my sitter down. So, I have subsequently got left over from that door wreath that Joan is commenting about, and perhaps I will put a picture of it in the community tab pages, and then you'll be able to see what we're talking about. So these are my leftover bulbs. So I ended up overbuying the bulbs, partly because I wanted to get quite short bulbs in my wreath. And I was conscious as well, because when I put them into my door wreath, because these bulbs have been growing undercover in the garden centre, they got quite leggy. There was lots of greenery, and I didn't want it flopping around everywhere. So what I ended up doing was, you can see how it's flopping around? I took off all the green leaves, so it was just the bulb, the root and the flower head which were on my wreath. And the act of taking the leaves off the bulb meant that sometimes I also took the flower off as well. So thank goodness I did buy extra. And then I attached the bulbs onto my wreath by threading them onto a wire and sort of pinning it in place. And the flower head is really, really delicate. The bulbs are a bit more substantial. And again, a couple of times I'd almost got it into position, and then the flower head pinged off. So it was good that I had got some extras. So I just dumped them into my container here, and I thought, what am I going to do with them? I can't just let them sit there. And I went to the charity shop before judging. So you have to set up. I set up on the Friday night, which was 7 till 9, but I was there from 7 till 8:30. Or you can choose to set up in the morning at this particular show, 8 till 10, and then the doors close at 10. The competitors have to leave. The judges have 2 hours, and then the doors open at 12 for the public to come in. So I had arranged to meet my friend there, who'd also got an exhibit for the competition. And we met for a cup of tea, we had a look round, and then we wanted to wait for the prize giving. So we went around the charity shops just to kill some time. And I very nearly bought some brass planters, a pair of matched brass planters. And I picked them up, and I thought, because I've missed out on a few things lately, because I've looked at them, thought of them, and then decided, slept on it, then decided I wanted it, and I went back to the charity shop and they'd gone. So I thought, no, I'm going to buy these, but actually they were quite expensive for a charity shop. And I walked them round and I thought, why am I doing this? Because up in my shelf in my workshop, I have got some planters, and these are miniature little windowsill vases. These little things here, which I've picked up from the charity shop for a few pounds. So this one doesn't have any markings on it, but if you've been following me for a while, you might recognise it, because it's one that I've got up. I've been offering it for sale. This one here is by DC, made in England. So a nice little sort of scalloped edged one. And it was only when I was, what was I trying to do? I was looking for something. I was on my ladder looking at the top shelf in my workshop, and I have this green windowsill vase that was the first one I bought. It's got a chip in it, and it cost me 50p. I just turned the vase around so you can't see the chip. And lo and behold, inside, I had totally forgotten about this one. So it's exactly the same colour as it's the larger one. It was sitting inside, but the larger one doesn't have handles. And the name on this, I can't quite work that out. It's sort of got a C on it. It sort of might lead you to think it says Constant Spy on there. It doesn't. But underneath, it says Glasgow. So I think that says something like, I don't know. It looks like a really curly C, or it could be a G. COVAN. COR, craft. I don't know. Coffin craft. I don't know what that is as well. So I thought, why am I buying something new when I could just use what I've already got? So having planted out my spent bulbs in the garden, and I seem to then be in reverse here, the things that are in the pots in the garden centre I've used for creative purposes, I'm then going to plant them back. So what I've got here is my champagne bucket full of soil. So this was the soil that was left over from the flowers I have just planted in the garden. I've shook off all the soil from the pots. So what I'm going to do is put them all back again. And my trowel is too big for this, so naturally I've gone straight to my cutlery drawer and got my granny's silver serving spoon out. But don't tell on me, but it's quite a handy size for putting in here. So my mix here is potting compost from previous bulbs, and I'm because there's no drainage in my pots, I've been putting a little bit of grit or gravel in the bottom. So now my gravel is mixed in with my compost. So there's a little bit of drainage going on, but it's not in that very formal gardener's way of having the gravel at the bottom and the compost at the top. Oh look, there's another bulb in there. Just chuck that on the flower bed. And what I'm going to do here is learn from my lesson previously and not overfill the bowls with compost, because otherwise you end up with not having any space for watering them. And when I'm going to have these indoors, they do dry out really quickly. So what I'm going to do first is get my daffodils in. So if you did see the picture of my fancy spring door wreath, you would have seen that my daffodil bulbs hadn't opened. They were just the bulbs with a tiny bit of a green shoot in them. But look, if the competition had been today, I've got a real indication of spring going on. These ones would have been all right. They're nice and compact. But these ones would have been, even today, a little bit leggy. So what do you reckon? Do I go into the green container or one of the sort of tan coloured ones? I think I'm going to go green. So I have got some tall ones, and I'm just going to nestle those in with my fingers. I'm going to overpack. So again, not doing the gardenery thing, I'm doing the sort of florist thing, because I want the impact of these bulbs. I'm, they're only going to last, a fortnight on my windowsill. So I don't think I need to have them, as you might do. So and they've gone higgledy-piggledy, because they were a little bit higgledy-piggledy growth-wise in the container anyway, but I've had them tumbled out into my little catch-all container, and they've been trying to find the light. So hopefully, once I've got them out on my kitchen windowsill in the daylight, they will right themselves, they will straighten themselves up. But that's just nature, isn't it? And then, just to secure them in a little bit, I shall fill in with some of the soil to pack down a little bit, but just remembering not to overfill, because I will need to water them. And then the problem with everything, gardening and all the rest of it, everything gets so mucky. So what I'll be doing will be to run that. I've got the outside tap next to me. I'll just run it outside, under the outside tap, to get rid of the worst of the soil, and then I shall take an old rag and just sort of, almost polish it up, just get rid of the wet and any last little bit of dirt that's going on. So that's number one done. And then my very leggy, I think that one might have had it. Some of these I may well have to plant straight out into the garden. For instance, there's no flower because I've taken it off the stem there. So this is going to be probably not planting as many as I thought. So holding them upside down so I can see what I've got. I don't think, I've picked something off there. Actually, it's not that many. And then the ones that went wrong, so they started off like that. And you can see I've cleaned the roots for designer effect. In the end, the roots weren't sufficiently clean, and I didn't want these dirty bits here, so I ended up sort of twisting the roots off, so I got a cleaner bulb. And you can see here what I mean. I picked the leaves off, and then there was just a bit of damage. The flower head came off at the same time too. So I've got that, and then in the bottom of my container, I have got all the... Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's two. Oh, that's good. So in the bottom of my container, I've then got all the little waifs and strays. Oops. That's a little proper hyacinth bud there. So I need to get those in water and enjoy those as a little bit of a cut flower. So I've only actually got 3 hyacinths which are still in flower. So I'm going to choose this container. It's got a marginally smaller hole. These are going to be very leggy and very fally ovary. We'll have to see how it goes. And to be honest, they've only got a few more days left in them. I was thinking perhaps if I wanted to keep the green on them, that they might be better off planted in a container that had a side, like a vase, and then the floppiness of the green would be supported by the sides of the vase, but that means looking for something else, and I'm out here in the garden now, so I'm not going to do that. So perhaps when I've cleaned these up, and we've got a Zoom coffee morning this morning, I shall clean these up and have them as my little background, and then you'll be able to see how well they do glow up. So it's just falling all over the place. But they've got two chances. They're either going to right themselves or they're going to continue to flop. If they continue to flop, I may well cut the flower heads off and just have those in a little bud vase. And then next time I'm doing, got green fingers, dirty fingers, I'll plant those out in the garden. So over here, my last little container, I have got 4 more of these tater-tates. So I will put those in there. And then a little bit of soil on the top with my serving spoon. And then pushing it down into place. So again, I think these ones will right themselves because the growth is still quite young. And I'm sure it's just that they need to properly find the sunlight. And if they don't, I just embrace the fact they're doing their own thing. But I have still got those little short twigs that I was putting into my other planted containers to support the flowers a little bit. So that is a job done. So it just looks, it's slightly more purposeful. And to be honest, these bulbs were quite pricey. I went to a garden centre to get them, and if only I had, waited or planned earlier. I noticed them in our market store. We have a weekend plant stall in town, and the bulbs cost me, I don't know how much they were, $2.99 in the garden centre. It was the same bulbs in the same state of, young growth, were £1. A pound. I can't think of the word. A pound a pot. Pound a pot. So yes, if I had been more thoughtful about my entering competition, I would have done all my shopping the weekend before. So I could have saved loads of money by buying my daffodils, my potted bulbs, locally instead of going to, a nationwide chain of garden centres. And I could have just got them at the right maturity, so I would have kept them outside, and then perhaps on the Friday morning brought them indoors so they could start to have a little bit of colour. I didn't necessarily want them to be in full bloom, but I wanted that hint of spring coming along. And also I could have mocked up and had more time to do my arrangements. I don't know whether you saw the video, but the one where the judge had marked me down, the one I got a 3rd place for, she said that it was reflections, and I had one large container with my blue hyacinths in and a smaller one with my grape hyacinths in, and they were supposed to be mirroring each other as a reflection of each other. And the judge said that they thought the flowers were all falling forward, which was sort of part of my design. But if I'd had more time, I would have bunched the flowers together and tied them together so they looked purposeful. As it happened, they did just look as if they were slopping to one side, but that was sort of what I'd intended to do. But I realised in hindsight I just didn't quite finesse it, and part of the reason for that I didn't do it was I was getting really hot and bothered, and it was the end of a long day, and I just couldn't get my fingers to tie the ribbon neatly around what I was trying to do. And because the hyacinths and the grape hyacinths are soft stemmed, I didn't want to be pulling my ribbons so tight that they were going to cut into the stems. So sometimes what you've got in your brain doesn't quite translate to what you actually wanted to do. So I have got a few more bulbs that I'm going to plant in the garden. I've got, one's got babies coming, look at that. A little bit of growth on the side there. So 4 of those, so I shall get those into the garden and then do a little bit of rough washing up under the tap in the kitchen sink, and then it will be all systems go. Certainly time for a cup of tea. See how rubbish I am at digging. I really don't enjoy this. So one big hole, push them in, and then we'll be off and ready. And I shall see you if you've signed up to take part in my coffee morning, so we can have a proper two-way chat. You will have already received the link to that. Look at that. Job done. So thank you so much for joining me out here this morning. It's such a pity it wasn't that lovely spring day that we had yesterday, but at least you've kept me company and I've done a job I've been meaning to do for quite a long time. So that's all for me for now. Kettle on, hands washed, and I'll see you at 11 o'clock for coffee morning. That's all for me for now. Bye.